Is it hard to get these women to do it these days, or what?
Well, it's definitely a little bit more complicated, especially when sometimes men forget to say thank you. I mean, thank you gets you sex.
I mean, after you sleep with them, they're supposed to say thank you?
No, before. Thank you for everything.
Go home and say thank you.
Oh, I see. Just thank you for everything.
Very simple. Take a shower and say thank you.
And how about begging? Does that work?
Not very often.
No. Now, there's a new sex survey out, and it's interesting that you surveyed in 3,500 people. And you found that a lot of these couples are bored. What are they? What's the problem?
Well, like you said, we surveyed 3,500 people. 25% of people were significantly bored in their relationships. Another 25 people were somewhat bored in their relationships. So 50% of all the people surveyed were in a state of feeling pretty bored.
And why is that?
Well, I think a lot of people said it had to do with sex ruts, infrequency of sex.
Infrequency?
Lack of frequency. Lack of frequency of sex.
But if they're bored with sex, why do they want to do it more often?
Well,
I don't get that.
Well, people wanted more sex. There were also a lot of parents.
They wanted more sex, but not with the spouse, maybe, with someone else.
Well, it was interesting. Over 50% of people said if my partner suggested something new in the bedroom, I would be totally up for it. But people don't talk about sex. They don't make suggestions.
Well, why? They're shy, they're scared. What do you think?
Well, we have the worst language when it comes to sex. We're so afraid of being judged, so we don't really share our fantasies. We don't talk to one another. And also, after long-term relationships, you start to think that your partner is going to magically get you and know everything about you, so you kind of give up on the talking.
I know. And also, a lot of men need to be taught.
Yes, and I have to say a lot of women need to be taught about their own bodies too and what they need, and that it's okay to ask for what you want.
I mean, let's face it, a man will just, is like a heated missile, you know? And we'll just go there. But a woman's body is more complicated, and men need to be taught where to go, how to do it.
Well, I think that women should be comfortable telling us and giving us some instructions. I mean, women are still faking orgasms quite a bit. I mean,
we're afraid of hurting your feelings, though.
You know what?
That's the big misconception about men is that they can't
hurt our feelings, have a constructive conversation with us. We'd rather be competent in bed and know what to do.
Really? So you wouldn't have hurty feelings if you said, I've hardly felt that? Would you?
Uh-oh.
Tell us how to say it.
I think, I think you should always talk about sex in a sexy way. I think part of the problem is when couples talk about sex, I see this in my practice all the time, there's no foreplay. Or when it comes to oral pleasure, it's like a running of the bulls, it's just a mad stampede. People say very mean, very vicious things. Instead of just framing it, how about just framing it as a very sexy conversation? Like, I have a fantasy of this kind of sex.
Okay. Or I love it when you do this.
Yeah.
As opposed to I really hate it.
When you do that.
Exactly.
Now, by the way, I know that you treat heterosexual couples. What about gay couples? Do you have different rules for them? Or is it the same thing? It's
funny, because you're talking about there's been a lot of, in the news lately, a lot of talk about negotiated monogamy and how gay male couples will cut each other a little more slack. But I have to tell you, I'm working with a lot of gay couples who are buying apartments together, adopting kids together, and really, the issues and the attitudes are extremely similar. Yeah. There are way more similarities than differences.
Except for the fact that when you know what someone else's body is like and what they're experiencing, you can talk about it far better. If your partner has your parts...
That's interesting.
They know more about what it takes to make them work.
It's like a Buick versus a Toyota. It's a problem.
It's interesting with heterosexual couples. One of the biggest issues is premature ejaculation.
With heteros.
With heteros, guys who just can't last a while. That issue rarely, if ever, comes up with gay couples.
Why? That's
fascinating. Because it's like, as you just said, it's like a matching of each other's sex drives.
I don't understand that at all. What's the difference? If the guy's a preemie, he's a preemie.
Well,
I don't get that.
I think perhaps it's in the conversation, being able to negotiate it better when you can understand, when you can speak from the biological perspective.
So when a heterosexual and the guy is a preemie, and he'll say, this doesn't happen that often. Now, what about infidelity? Because there's a lot of cheating going on, and I'm not just talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger's laundry room here. I'm talking about regular people are cheating a lot. They say 65% of women and 80% of men would cheat if they knew they wouldn't get caught.
Yeah.
I'm surprised the rest of them don't say that. Aren't you?
Well, I think there's definitely a difference between emotional infidelity and physical infidelity. I mean, people are realizing that the emotional stuff is sometimes far more painful, but you understand what it's like to lust after someone else and have that connection. So is monogamy dead? Well, I mean, it definitely doesn't work for everyone, but you just have to be honest about it.
Is it natural, monogamy?
Well, you know, it's funny. It used to be the 7-year itch.
Yeah.
Then it became the 5-year itch. Then recently it was the 3-year itch. And then there was another article about the 2-year itch. And
now it's 3
pretty
days.
soon it'll be the 3 days.
But
you know what? People who cheat, who are married and cheat, they end up getting married again.
Infidelity can save a marriage. Is that possible?
Well, I don't think that infidelity can save a marriage. I think that if you have issues in your marriage and you say, listen, I don't ever want to go to someone else, let's deal with it first. But we're married, we're not dead, which means that fantasizing, having, you know, thoughts in your head about other people is a really normal thing, as long as we're honest about it. But we're so afraid of being judged, and we're so afraid of actually saying to our partners, by the way, something's going on. I want us to get back to the way we were. Or, you know what, maybe monogamy's not for me, but we don't say that, so we try and get caught to get out of it.
Okay, now what about Anthony Weiner? The guy was basically not physically cheating on his wife. He was just doing this sexting. Maybe it was turning him on, and it helped the marriage. Is that possible, Ann?
Well, I mean, I think he had a compulsive issue. But I think for many couples, they will accept things like flirting. They will accept things like pornography. I think more couples are using porn together. I think they will accept more kinds of internet, Facebook flirtation. So I think that couples, their taboos are loosening. I think the parameters are expanding.
Yeah.
But I mean, you take somebody like Anthony Weiner, and I mean, that was an extreme case of compulsiveness, and I don't think many people would tolerate that.
Except that she knew that there were things going on before. And again,
she did?
Well, it's been discussed that she knew that he had these kind of relationships, is a bad word, but he had these experiences, internet experiences earlier.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think if you're upfront about some of these things, then it's not really a surprise. The problem is always with these guys, their partners get humiliated. They get caught in front of everyone. I mean, that's the running
But do you think he was vilified too much for what he did? I mean, he didn't really hurt anybody. At the end of the day,
I think it was. I think he was vilified too much. But again, he lied, and he's a public figure. I mean, I think ultimately it's between him and his wife. But he went out there and started lying.
I didn't know that she knew he did this before.
Well, it was. I mean, there was some discussion that he had these kind of experiences early on that she had known about, but he said that he was going to stop. I mean, so if you know who your partner is getting out of it. Or maybe she knew. I mean, we never know. We don't know what people know and what's okay in the relationship. But once it becomes public fodder, then we all jump in and get judgmental.
Okay.
I just think it's also a slippery slope. I know a lot of women who are like, oh, he flirts too much, and they have to accept it. And then he dollies too much, and they have to accept it, right? Yeah. And then, of course, like, oh, I should have seen it coming, or I knew it was coming. But it's been a gradual slope of compromise after compromise. So do you think when a man's flirting,
let's say you're at a party and he's always flirting with your best friend or something, should you watch out for that? Well, let's another scenario. You're tapping into his Facebook, and you find out that he's been communicating with the next girlfriend from back then. Yeah. Do you think that you should be worried about something like that?
I don't.
You don't?
I don't.
I do. I do. I think in a trusting, committed relationship, you should have, you know, absolutely nothing to hide. So I think if you can bring it out in the open, you can do it out in the open. If you can flirt out in the open.
But he's not doing it out. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I think that you always trust your gut, and that you should never hack into your partners and anything that's public. I mean, you can see it. Yeah, I kind of feel like you trust your partner. You trust your partner. And again. I don't really care if my husband is talking to ex-girlfriends. It really doesn't bother me one way or the other.
Even when it's like a high school girlfriend or a college sweetheart?
No, I ask him about those all the time. I'm like, what are they doing? He's like, I don't really care. I mean, but that's what he tells you? That's just me. That's what he tells me.
He tells you he doesn't care what they're doing?
No.
You believe him?
I honestly do. We could have him come on. I really do.
Ian, what do you say to that?
I believe in actually snooping. I think it's okay to snoop on your partner. I think that if you're in a trusting relationship, I don't think you should have lots of passwords or lots of cell phones. I think everything should be open, and I think as soon as you have something to hide in a relationship, I think you're on that slippery slope towards boredom and towards infidelity.
That's why we're not married to each
other. I have very high standards.
To you two. No, I don't think you two would work out.